Welcome to the North Sessions. Settle in and let every story carry you towards sleep. My name is Lewis, and I will be your narrator this evening. Tonight, we find ourselves in a quiet upstairs sitting room on Baker Street, on a late and foggy London evening, where a violin plays soft and wandering notes, and the fire burns low and warm. Before we begin, take a moment to find your most comfortable position. The sound of a crackling fireplace is warming the air around you, and soft piano music, woven gently with binaural tones, is settling in beneath these words. Let those sounds hold you as we ease into the night together. Close your eyes now, if you haven't already. Take a slow breath in and let it go without any hurry at all. Notice the weight of your body where it rests. Feel the surface beneath you holding you completely steady and still. Let your shoulders drop a little. Let your jaw soften. Bring your attention gently down through your chest, your belly rising and falling with each quiet breath. There is nothing you need to do right now. Let your hands grow heavy in your lap or at your sides. Let your legs go loose. Feel the warmth behind your eyelids. Feel the soft darkness there, calm and without edges. Your breath is slow. Your thoughts are beginning to drift, like fog moving quietly over water, soft and without any direction at all. This is your time to rest, and the story is just ahead, ready to carry you the rest of the way. This script was written by Zuhude Pablo. The bow came to rest across Holmes's knee with the quietest settling sound, the horsehair still trembling faintly from the last drawn note. He reached beside the chair without looking, his fingers finding the small amber block of rosin by memory, by long habit. The way a man finds a familiar object in the dark without needing to think about it. Watson turned a page in his book, the paper giving a soft whisper against itself. The fire shifted in the grate, sending a brief bloom of orange light across the ceiling before it steadied again into its slow, even glow. Holmes drew the rosin block along the horsehair in long, unhurried strokes. Each pass left a faint, chalky trace, pale and powdery, catching the firelight for a moment before disappearing into the grain of the bow. The sound it made was barely a sound at all, a dry, feathery friction, like the slow turning of an old page, something between silence and touch. The fog outside had thickened a little. The gas lamps along Baker Street were no longer distinct points of light, but soft, widening halos, golden and diffuse, bleeding gently into the grey. The window glass carried a faint bloom of condensation along its lower edge. Holmes did not hurry. There was no performance in this, no audience to consider. It was simply a thing that wanted doing, and he was doing it, and that was enough for the evening. The repetition seemed to settle him, as it sometimes settled a restless mind to follow a slow and necessary task with no particular end in mind beyond the task itself. From somewhere below, on the street side, came the soft two-beat knock of Mrs. Hudson closing the front door behind herself after a brief errand. The sound rose through the old building gently, familiar as the creak of the third stair or the particular way the parlor door swung on its hinges in damp weather. Neither man remarked on it. It was simply Baker Street continuing, as it always did, around them. Watson lowered his book a little without closing it. He watched Holmes for a moment, the way the lamplight moved over the long fingers drawing slowly back and forth. Then he looked again at the page, though he did not immediately read. The rosin dust drifted, faintly visible in the lamplight, before settling into nothing. The bow rested across Holmes's knee, and his hand moved the block along it again, even and slow, returning from one end and then making the long, quiet journey back. Holmes set the rosin block aside, settling it back onto the small cloth beside the chair with the same quiet precision with which he had lifted it. His fingers stayed curved around the neck of the violin for a moment before he raised it, bringing the body up to rest beneath his chin in one unhurried motion. He did not settle into any particular posture. He simply held the instrument the way a man holds something he has carried for many years, with a looseness that comes not from carelessness, but from deep familiarity. The bow lifted. He drew it across the lowest string, barely pressing, testing the tension the way you might rest a hand against a wall to find your footing in a dim room. The note that came was low and open, not quite a melody yet, more like a question placed gently into the air. Then he began. The phrases he played were slow and unconnected, drifting from one to the next without any clear intention, the way a man walks on a Sunday afternoon with no destination in particular. The notes wandered up through the middle register, paused, turned back on themselves, and settled briefly into a small, soft interval before moving on again. Watson turned another page. He did not look up, but the quality of his stillness shifted slightly. The way a room changes when a clock begins to chime. Not a disturbance, simply a new element woven into the existing quiet. The fire sent a slow curl of amber light across the ceiling. The smell of warm wood and coal settled deeper into the room, mingling with something faintly resinous from the violin itself, a dry and woody fragrance that spoke of old craftsmanship and long use. Holmes paused between one phrase and the next, holding the bow just above the string without touching it. Then he played 3 more notes, descending so gently that they seemed less played than released, the way a breath is let go without effort in the very last moment before sleep. Outside, the fog pressed close against the glass. The gas lamps had given up most of their shape to the mist and burned now as soft, pale gatherings of light, without edge, without shadow. A horse and cab passed somewhere below, the hooves muffled by the damp air, the sound reaching the parlor already half dissolved. Holmes drew the bow in a long, slow arc across the middle string, and the note sustained itself quietly in the room for a moment after the bow had lifted. He did not seem to be listening for anything in particular. He simply played, and the evening held itself around him, and the fire burned low, and Watson read on in his armchair, and Baker Street continued softly outside in the fog. Watson reached the end of a paragraph and did not begin the next one. He simply stopped, the way a person sometimes stops mid-walk to look at nothing in particular, feeling only that the moment has changed somehow. He looked up from the page. The lamp on the side table beside him had grown dim. Its flame shrunk down to a thin orange thread, trembling very slightly above the wick. The room had not gone dark, not exactly, but the light had pulled back from the corners and the ceiling, gathering itself more tightly around the small circle where he sat. He closed the book and rested it against his knee for a moment, his thumb holding his place out of habit, though he knew well enough where he had been. Then he set it down on the arm of the chair and rose, unhurried. The lamp was a simple one, brass, with a glass chimney slightly warm to the touch. Watson lifted the chimney away with 2 fingers, setting it carefully on the table beside a folded newspaper. The smell of lamp oil rose up, thin and faintly metallic, curling away into the warmer smell of the room. He drew the small trimming scissors from the tray kept beside the lamp for exactly this purpose, and he bent close, looking at the wick. The burnt portion was uneven, gone to a soft grey char at one side. He clipped it back with one clean, quiet cut, and the tiny flake of black fell without a sound somewhere beneath the lamp stand. He replaced the chimney. He turned the wheel of the wick slowly, coaxing the flame back up until it steadied into something broader and more even. A warm amber that filled the near half of the room like the gradual return of a familiar thing, the way color comes back into a garden after cloud shadow passes over. Watson remained still for a moment, looking at nothing, his hands loose at his sides. The warmth from the lamp reached his knuckles. He was aware, in a quiet way, of the fire behind him and of Holmes's violin still threading its low notes through the room, unhurried as ever. Outside, somewhere below on Baker Street, a voice called out once in the mist. A brief sound, not urgent, the greeting of one familiar person to another passing in the fog. Then it dissolved and left no trace behind. Watson picked up his book again, found his page, and settled back into the armchair. The room was the same room as before, only a little brighter in the near corner, and the flame stood straight and steady behind the glass. Burning as though it had been burning quietly all evening and intended to go on. Holmes had been playing in the same unhurried way for some time, drawing slow notes from the strings without any particular destination in mind. The way water finds its way across a flat surface, spreading quietly rather than rushing anywhere. The notes fell into the room and were absorbed by it, by the curtains and the armchairs and the warm thickness of the coal smoke air. Then he stopped. Not completely, not in any abrupt way. He let the last note fade until there was nothing left of it, and then his bow came to rest against his knee. He turned his head slightly and looked at the instrument across his arm, his expression the same unhurried, neutral attention he gave to most things that asked something of him. Watson heard the small, metallic sound of a peg turning. A quarter turn, then a fraction more. Holmes plucked the string once with his thumb, a brief note that hung for a moment and then settled. He listened to it the way one listens to something distant, head slightly inclined, not looking at anything in particular. He turned the peg again, very slightly, plucked once more. The second note was just a shade different from the first, fuller in some way that Watson would have been unable to name precisely. Only that it sat more easily in the air, the way a word finally found after a moment's searching settles into a sentence and makes it right. Holmes was still for a little while after that, his thumb resting against the string. The fire shifted in the grate, and a small falling of ash brought a brief brightness to the coals. The gas lamps outside pressed their pale light against the window glass, blurring softly in the moisture that had gathered there from the night. Then he drew the bow across the string once slowly, listening to what the tuned string offered. It was a single long note, even and quiet, and it moved through the room without hurry. From somewhere in the street below came the soft, rolling sound of a cart passing over the damp cobbles. It went by unhurried, and the sound grew smaller, and then there was only the room again. Holmes lifted his gaze briefly toward the window, following the sound without any apparent interest. He looked back at the violin. Then he raised the bow again and continued playing, the same quiet wandering as before, the same slow notes finding the same warm air. Nothing had changed, and nothing had needed to change. The instrument had simply needed a moment of honest attention, the way most things do, and now it was ready to go on. Watson turned a page without thinking about it. The lamp beside him burned with its even flame. The room held everything it held, warmly and without effort, as it had done all evening. Holmes lowered the bow first, resting it across his knee. He sat quietly for a moment after that, as he often did when one small task had finished and another had not yet begun. The violin he set down with both hands, carefully, into the open case on the side table. The velvet lining received it without a sound. He leaned the bow alongside it, and the small brass fittings caught the firelight for just a moment before the lid came down. He did not fasten the clasps. There was no need. He reached, instead, toward the mantelpiece. His pipe was there, a dark briar with a stem worn smooth from long use, sitting in its usual place as though it had never been anywhere else. He turned it once in his fingers, unhurriedly, the way a person handles something familiar without really looking at it. The tobacco pouch came next. He loosened the cord at the top and pinched a portion of the tobacco out with slow, practiced fingers. There was a dry, dark smell to it, like autumn leaves pressed somewhere between the pages of a book. He worked it into the bowl with his thumb in small, patient circles, pressing it down gently, not rushing any part of the process. Watson did not look up from his reading, but he heard it all the same, the faint, papery sound of the tobacco settling, and then the quiet slide of a match being drawn from the box on the mantelpiece. The match caught with a small, soft sound, and the smell of sulfur moved briefly through the air and then disappeared. Holmes drew once on the pipe slowly, and then once more, and the tobacco found its rhythm. A thin line of smoke curled upward toward the ceiling. It moved without hurry, drifting sideways in some small current of warm air, and then gradually it lost itself among the shadows near the cornice. Holmes lowered himself back into his chair. He held the pipe loosely in one hand, his elbow resting on the arm of the chair, his gaze returning to the window. The fog outside had thickened in the last hour. The gas lamps along Baker Street were softer now, their light pooled and gentle, not reaching quite as far as before. He sat as he had been sitting all evening, in that particular stillness of his that was not emptiness, but rather the opposite of it, a fullness, a quiet kind of attention turned inward. The fire shifted. A log settled. The smoke from the pipe rose in a slow, steady line. Watson turned another page. The room was very warm. Outside, the fog pressed quietly against the glass, and London went about its soft, muffled business in the dark. Holmes drew on the pipe one final time slowly, and let the smoke leave him just as slowly. Then he held the pipe away from his face and looked at it for a moment, the way a person looks at something when they are deciding to put it down. He set it in the ceramic dish on the side table. The small sound it made was the only sound in the room for a moment, a soft, dry click of briar against glaze. He sat still after that, his hands resting open in his lap. The fire had settled into a low and steady burn, and the room was very warm. The smell of the pipe tobacco still drifted, faint now, a little sweet, like the last of something rather than the beginning. After a while, he reached toward the violin case on the side table. He did not rush the unlatching of it. The brass clasps turned under his fingers one at a time, each giving a small, precise sound. The lid came up slowly, and the velvet lining inside was very dark, a deep wine color that the firelight made almost warm. The violin was there, as it always was, lying with a kind of patient stillness. Holmes lifted it with both hands. He did not cradle it so much as receive it, the way one accepts something that has been waiting. He turned it once, very slightly, and the light moved across the surface of the wood in a long, gradual wave, amber deepening to brown, then catching gold again near the edge of the ribs. It was a beautiful thing to look at, and he looked at it without saying so. He reached then for the bow. He drew it across the strings once without pressing, letting the horsehair just graze them. The sound it made was barely a sound at all, a breath, a suggestion, a hum that seemed to belong to the room rather than to interrupt it. From the landing outside came a soft sound just then. It was Mrs. Hudson setting something on the small table near the door, as she sometimes did in the evening, a glass of water or a folded cloth, things left quietly without knocking. There was a faint pause on the other side of the door, as though she had briefly listened, and then her steps moved away down the stairs without hurry. Holmes did not look up. He drew the bow across the strings again, a little more slowly this time, pressing only a little more. The note it made was low and open, not quite a melody yet, more like the feeling of one. He settled back in his chair. His elbow found its place on the armrest. The violin rose under his chin, and he closed his eyes. The first note he drew was not quite a note. It was a feeling that a note might follow. The bow moved slowly, and the string gave its sound in a long, even breath, low and open without hurry. He did not decide what to play. His fingers found the strings the way hands find their way in the dark of a familiar room, not by thinking, but by having been there before. There was a phrase that came. He followed it. It was something he had heard a long time ago, or perhaps played, or perhaps only imagined. It did not belong to any composer he could name with certainty. It simply rose, and he let it. The bow moved in a gentle arc. The sound was slow, wandering, the way water moves when there is no particular place it needs to reach. A note would settle, and then lift slightly, and then fall away, and the silence after each phrase was as much a part of it as the phrase itself. The fire shifted behind the grate. A log had settled, and the flames spread briefly, and the light in the room changed just slightly, warming the walls before returning to what it had been. Holmes felt the warmth of it on the side of his face. He did not open his eyes. His fingers moved again. The melody, if it was a melody, turned itself gently, like something slowly looked at from a different angle. It came back around to a note it had visited before, and rested there a moment, the way a person returns to a thought they have not finished with. Outside, somewhere on Baker Street below, there was the slow sound of a cart moving through the wet. The wheels made a low, steady sound on the stones, and then it passed, and the street was quiet again. Holmes played on. The bow pressure was very light. The strings gave their sound without much asking. The notes he drew were few, and he let each one finish before reaching toward the next, the way one reads when one is not in any hurry. There was nothing to resolve. The phrase went where it wanted, and he followed it, and sometimes it went nowhere at all, only rested in the warmth of the room, and that was enough. He breathed in through his nose, slow and without thinking about it. The air still held the last trace of the pipe, faint and a little sweet. It lay beneath everything, unhurried, like the memory of a pleasant afternoon. His shoulders had dropped without his noticing. His jaw was loose. The violin was warm beneath his chin, and the bow moved, and the sound it made was very quiet, and the fire held its low and steady light. And the room held everything gently, the way a room does when the night has grown late and still. Watson was in the chair by the window. He had been there for some time, his head tipped slightly to one side, his breathing slow and even. A book lay open across his knee, though he had stopped reading it long before. The pages had not turned in a while. Holmes continued to play. The fire gave a soft sound, just a small settling, a whisper of ash. The light shifted for a moment and then held again, steady and amber, pooling across the rug and reaching toward the legs of Watson's chair. Watson stirred. It was very small, the way a person moves when a dream shifts beneath them. His shoulder lifted and his chin dropped, and one hand moved across the open pages of the book, not looking for anything, only adjusting. His breath caught for just a moment the faintest interruption. Holmes let the bow slow. Watson murmured something. It was low, almost shapeless, barely a word at all. It may not have been a word. It was the kind of sound a person makes when they are very far down into sleep, and something from the surface has reached them, just slightly, and they have answered it without meaning to. Holmes waited. The fire gave its quiet sound. Outside, Baker Street held its stillness. Watson's breathing evened again. His shoulder settled. His hand came to rest at the edge of the book, fingers loose, no longer looking for anything. He was like a lake in the early morning, the last small ripple moving outward and going still, the surface returning to itself. His head found its resting angle again. His jaw was soft. The book shifted very slightly on his knee, tilting a degree or two, but it did not fall. Holmes watched him for a moment. There was nothing to tend to. Watson had simply gone somewhere farther down, that was all. The murmur had been nothing, only the sound of a man settling more deeply into where he already was. Holmes turned back to the strings. His bow found the phrase again, gently, without needing to search for it. He came back to the note the melody had rested on before, and he let it sit there, warm and unhurried. He did not take it anywhere new. The room was very quiet now except for the fire and the strings. Watson's breathing moved slowly in the silence, a low and steady rhythm beneath everything. The book on his knee did not move. His face was still. Holmes played on. The bow moved in its slow arc. The sound it made was softer than before, as though the room itself had asked for less, and he had listened. The note held and rested, and the fire held its light, and the night lay still beyond the glass. The room held everything it needed. The amber light lay across the floor in long, soft bands, reaching as far as it could reach, and then simply stopping, content. The fire breathed in its quiet way, adding its warmth to the warmth already gathered there. The strings rose once more very gently, and the note they carried was the same note the evening had begun on, unhurried, unbothered, finding its way back to where it had started. Outside, the city rested beneath its dark and patient sky. And in the room on Baker Street, two old friends kept their long, untroubled vigil together. The music continued, soft as breathing. The light did not move.